Welcome to Finding Your HR Advocacy Voice, the podcast where policy meets people's strategy. I'm your host, Tracy Justice, also with co-host Chris Schrader and co-host Rachel Gwynn. And each episode is designed to equip HR professionals, nonprofit leaders, and small business owners, especially those without a dedicated HR department, with the insights you need to understand how policy impacts your workplace. Let's break down the big issues, spotlight what matters most, and empower you to show up for your people and your purpose. Now let's get started. All right. How are you guys doing? How are you doing, Chris? How are you doing, Rachel?
Doing great.
Very good. Very good. Thank you.
Awesome. So we're going to go ahead and get started because we have quite a bit of information that we want to share with you. First, we want to share about SHRM's in-district campaign coming up August 4th to September 4th. And, you know, what we want to do is inform you on what those policies are. And then let me switch these over. Let me move this over. Fix this real quick on the screen. Okay. So what we want to do is share what those priorities are, give you an opportunity to see what they are, and so that you can be able to have conversations with your circles of influence as well, and make sure that you understand it very well. So Chris and Rachel, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share the website. Well, the website is on SHRM.org, and you would go to the advocacy tab and then go to state priorities. And so one of the priorities is AI. Now, are you guys hearing anything about AI in your circles?
It's pervasive in everything we do, right?
Yes.
So, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yes, and SHRM's stance is that AI is not replacing humans; they're augmenting human work, and so getting involved gives us an opportunity to be able to speak on that as well. Pay transparency and equity, skills-based hiring, flexible work arrangements, workplace health and safety, interstate mental health compact agreements. Now, this one I find very interesting. Do any of you know what that could be? Explain a little bit more from a Hoosier perspective, what that could mean for us.
Sure. So basically, mental health falls under the rubric for most people. It's part and parcel in the way they think about it as part of their health insurance, right? Because when the ACA was passed, this all had to come in as parity, remember? So that said, insurance is regulated at the state level basis by all 50 states. And so therefore, how it's regulated in one state may be regulated differently in another. So where this typically comes into play is in things like telehealth, right? So I think, Tracy, I can't remember if it certainly wasn't last year, but I think we had the year before, I believe there was like a telehealth bill that was there, and part and parcel of the issue was that some of the physicians or nurse practitioners may be outside the state of Indiana with certain providers. And so what was within that bill was to basically say, okay, well, if they're outside the state, but they are employees of whatever health organization is employing them, if that's an Indiana company and subject to our insurance rules and things like that, that's going to be allowed. That bill did not.
It didn't.
I don't remember. I don't think it got out of committee, but nonetheless, this whole issue here, the big key word there is interstate, right? So as we know, there is a real dearth of mental health professionals, right? So when you think about it just on the capacity side, we don't have enough relative to demand. And so there's going to have to be an interstate solution if you're going to be able to provide it, because otherwise you just don't have enough capacity. So that's what that's addressed. That's what that's pointed at. But that will require legislation in those states to permit that.
Okay, is that like sort of like the reciprocity and licensing, that kind of conversations that were going on earlier this year? Okay,
that's a not identical, but that's a good way to look at it. Okay. And then the 4-day, 30. I haven't heard any. Is Indiana considering something like this?
Because I don't think I've seen anything like that.
I haven't seen anything like this come through.
No.
I can tell you that I have clients who are exploring a 4-day work week, but on a 40-hour basis. And I have one that's implemented it very successfully, and productivity's actually gone up. And so I think the 4-day work week is at the forefront of a lot of conversations, but I'm seeing it in a 40-hour context, not 32.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, I will say this, and this is where the 32-hour thing might come in. It might be even lower hours. In my research into AI, one of the most profound things I read, and it was from one of these AI developers, it was a CEO, and the statement he made was that at AI's currently development pace, what he's comfortable of is that it will separate the concept of productivity from time.
Oh.
And I was struck by that because that is the literal underpinning of the Fair Labor Standards Act as it applies.
Can you say that again, Chris?
Yeah. He said that AI was going to separate the concept of productivity from time.
Okay.
Simply
I love
because
that.
processing speed, and because if you look at ChatGPT-5, it's got basically, I think they said 4 quadrillion processing.
Oh yeah, it's going to be massive. Yeah,
it just. But the thing that grabbed me about that statement more than anything was, wow, that kind of goes right to the core of the Fair Labor Standards Act.
Yeah.
So why do you say it goes to the core of the Fair Labor Standards Act?
The Fair Labor Standards Act basically is based on the notion that you can pay somebody for an hour of labor on some sort of assumption of productivity.
Okay. And we had this conversation before, I think, because, thinking about, I'd rather be paid for productivity rather than paid for my time. Like, don't take 40 hours of my time. If I can do it in 10 hours, that's none of your business. Pay me.
That's why people argue to be in exempt roles. Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Pay me for work. Don't pay me by the clock. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like that, pay me for the value I'm giving, if I'm, creating, if I'm producing a lot, it doesn't matter how long it took.
But I think getting to that 32-hour week, that 32-hour week, there's no doubt in my mind, and Rachel contribute to this if you there's no doubt.
Because I feel like she was going to say something.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, there's no doubt in my mind that AI is going to absorb an awful lot of portions of jobs, especially those involving repetitive cognitive approach.
Yeah.
And just if you're in any kind of job moving information from point A to point B, AI is going to supplant those. And so that will free up human capital to do something else. I don't know what right now, but it will free it up. But in my mind, once that starts to really happen and take pace, the question is how much human time do you need? Do you really need? I mean, maybe we do have a 30-hour work week or 32, maybe it's 30 or whatever, right? I don't know what it is, but I think that conceptual challenge is upon us.
Yeah. So one of the comment that I was going to make with regard to exempt status, I think, and I absolutely believe that social media and AI play a role in this. There's a generational gap in the concept of time at this point, because I'll be 46 tomorrow. My 60-year-old colleagues are used to the you grind it out. You show up at the office at 7 and you don't leave,
right.
Especially if you're a newbie. And so you're exempt, but that equates to a minimum of 60 hours a week. Whereas, we're seeing with our summer associates, they're kind of like, hey, I'm going to roll in around 9. I'm going to kind of get stuff done. I'm going to pull up my Chat GPT to write you a memo. There's really a struggle with some of that. Not this year. My summer associates are great. But last year we had a real problem with that. And even the year before, where there's just a disconnect. And it's so disparate between that older generation and these younger coming in. And then us in the middle are like, well, we kind of get it, but you got to show up at 8, buddy. You know, like you got to put your time in. And so I think we'll be seeing more of that too, as we're bringing in this new generation into the workforce. The expectations for them are very different than the people that may be hiring them.
Yeah, you can
Great point.
this,
Great point.
Rachel. A couple years ago, when I was giving a lecture on the Fair Labor Standards Act to my students at IU, and I was talking about the distinction between hourly work and salary, and whether you're exempt or you're not exempt from the overtime provisions. And one of the students held up his hand and said, how long are we going to be stuck with the concept that value delivery is shackled to a specific geography or point in time?
Yeah.
And
Deep. I said, for a lot longer than you think.
Yes, absolutely. And for lawyers, as long as you're billing at that 0.6, it's indefinite. So yeah.
Yeah.
So then paid leave.
Yeah. So this goes into the BBB. So
Yeah, that does go into the BBB. So honestly, this can take us right into it. So let's switch gears. Let's talk about that BBB.
Okay, very good. So I'm actually going to start out with the workforce Pell Grants. So to put this into perspective, for the last 3 years, SHRM has been working very hard to get standalone legislation passed to create what are called workforce Pels. So basically, the way the current Pell Grant system works is that it has first, it has an economic threshold, right? You have to be poor to receive these, and then as they were designed, they could only be used really at 4-year institutions, right? So really college. And so what SHRM had been arguing for, and a lot of other folks, and this in no small part came about because I don't know if you've noticed, but young men have stopped going to college. I don't mean altogether, but I mean
it decreased. Yeah,
it's down 20% in just the last 2 years. It'll probably be down 25% this year.
What do you think it is for? Why? Why do you think?
What they really reflect back is the time commitment of 4 years. But the big issue is the debt.
Okay.
And so they don't want to do it.
Doesn't
make any sense to him. Didn't make any sense to my son. He didn't go to college.
And
my son didn't either. He's a supervisor at a construction company. He's got his welding certificate, and he's making he owns his home. Yes. He's, and then my son-in-law he was very focused on debt. He's been with my daughter since high school, and he's decided he wanted to go into the union. And so he's now making over $40 an hour as a union electrician. Sure. And it's hard to argue with that.
No, because the times have changed, right? The times have changed.
They're just opting out. And so what this was really pointed at, if you're a middle-class young man making that decision and your parents help support that, if at least not morally, financially, or let you live at home or something like that, while you're in that process, you're going to be fine. But the folks of meager means, the young men of meager means in particular, not so much, right? And this isn't pointed just at men. It's not. It's a poverty. So basically takes the same poverty standard as the Pell Grants. No difference, right? So it's pointed at the people who don't have money. And so same eligibility, but these are pointed at basically blue collar work for all intents and purposes, right? So eligible programs have to provide at least 150 clock hours of instruction, but less than 600 hours of instruction for a minimum of 8 weeks. So this is really pointed at getting people developed and into the workforce.
Skills and certification.
Bingo. And get in, and then you work. And as I'm sure, Rachel, it would be reflected back to you by the construction supervisor that he learns more every day, and someday he will be a construction manager, undoubtedly.
Yeah.
But you just have to do that stuff on the job.
Mm-hmm.
But you start here. So this is really intended to get him right out of high school, get him into these programs, pay for it entirely, and get him into the workforce. So that's what this is really pointed at. So when I saw this, I was delighted because I fought for this bill for 3 years. And so here it is, right? So SHRM ought to be turning handstands over that one.
And then real quick, how did you do that? In what ways? And when you say you fought for that, what does that really mean for those advocates?
I went to the Hill and pushed to get people to the Indiana delegation to pledge a vote to it, to become a co-sponsor for it, to do it. And the Indiana delegation, by the way, for the record, was very supportive of this, both in the House and in the Senate. It didn't have anybody that thought that was a bad idea. Nobody, as a matter of fact. It wasn't. When I say I had to fight for it, I really didn't. I just had to make sure they were voting. The problem was time. We got it out of the House 1 year and ran out of calendar on the second. Then we had elections, and it just always got caught in the switches. Other things were stacked in front of it. Spending resolutions usually got in the way. So, but let's face it. I mean, bills like this one become what's in Washington, D.C. parlance, a Christmas tree bill.
Oh, okay. All the ornaments added.
Hung on it like an ornament, yeah. And so this was hung on it like an ornament, right? So that's through, and so that's a big deal. So the next one is no tax on tips. Now, this passed as a separate piece of legislation in the Senate, but it was really just folded into this piece of legislation in the Senate, right? And then the House didn't really touch it. So this is effective this year. So this is a big deal. This counts for all of your tip income this year. And but it sunsets in 2028.
Chris, when you say all of the income, my understanding was it's capped at $25,000.
It is. I'll get to that in a minute.
Okay, sorry.
I said all earned this year. Up
to okay. Point. Already. Okay.
Yeah. And anybody that earned 25 grand in tips already at the joint level, I want to know that job. But if you did that by 4th of July.
And then it's customarily tipped, right? Like those jobs that are customarily tipped. Because I was getting excited, like, I'm going to put a tip jar on here, but no.
I don't think we're going to make it.
No, I don't think so. Yeah.
But anyway, my key point here is it's effective this year, this tax year. Okay. So there's zero federal tax on up to $18,500 if you're an individual.
Okay.
Or up to $25,000 if you're joint filers. So if you have joint filers, you and your spouse in the household, both of you make tip income, then it's $25,000 if you file joint, which most usually do. And then $18,500 if it's an individual. This does not apply to high earners. So if you are in a tipped job, but you're in your typical annual income, whatever your base pay is plus your tips, is $160K a year or more, then you are not eligible for this.
Oh, okay.
I just want to know who's getting tipped that makes $160K. But anyway,
right? What kind of job is that?
Yeah,
I want to see if I'd be able to do it.
Yeah. So that's the cutoff there. Okay. But the key thing here is sunsets in 2028. Okay. Which means it's going to be, if it continues, it's going to be the responsibility of another Congress and another president to do that. Okay.
I like that. I think it gives the ability for the next, president to see how it worked out well, and if it didn't, get rid of it.
It's very common for sunsets to be built in. Very common. Usually what happens, I'll give you a real good example. Section 127, I'll get to that in a minute. When that was originally established, they set it up with sunsets. And then every time they reauthorized it, they set it up for another sunset. And thing had like 5 sunsets over like 20 years. And finally we were like, can we just all agree this thing is here and make it permanent? And they finally did. But it's not unusual to see novel things built with sunsets. That's actually very typical.
We have that here in the state of Indiana with
Yes, that's correct.
unpaid leave that was just enacted. That sunsets, I think.
Exactly. Sunsets are
okay. So
sunsets are pretty popular.
So it sunsets by the time the next governor comes into, if there's another governor. Is that?
I can't remember the sunset for that one. Do you remember?
Oh, okay.
I think it's 28.
28. Yeah. So next governor. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, super cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
They don't know that they were doing stuff like that.
Everybody's saying, and oftentimes those sunsets are put in because it helps get shaky people on the bill to vote for it.
Hold on real quick. Rachel, did you say tomorrow's your birthday?
Yeah.
Happy birthday. Oh my gosh. My birthday's next Monday. So we are like.
When she said her age out loud, because I don't know if you saw the look on my face.
I did see the look on your face.
Like 32 or something.
Oh,
I didn't.
I know I liked you. Good job, character right there.
No,
yeah.
I'm not kidding. Well, I want to make sure my mouth didn't open.
Because I know when you said my son-in-law and then you said 46, and I was just like, hold on, are we just going to act like? And then I totally forgot. But so I brought it back.
I'm like, were you like 12?
Well, my kids are, my oldest is 26. So I started.
See, and I was just telling Chris, my oldest is 24. Okay. I'll be 45 next Monday. So yeah.
18 months.
Yeah. So we are the July babies. Okay.
Later than you guys. So then, so BBB. So another one, we got no tax on overtime. Also effective this year. 0 federal tax on up to $12,500 of overtime earnings, and this is also $25K on the joint filers, right? So you got 2 people in the household, hourly workers, so they can do this. And again, this is just on federal tax, only on federal tax. Doesn't have anything to do with state or local taxes.
Still paying FICA and Social Security, right? Or still paying Social Security and Medicare?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely doing all of that. Yeah, and I'll get to that in a minute. The implications.
No, you're good.
No. That's
no, you're asking great questions. Yeah,
that's a very good observation to make, because that's not how employees think. You tell them something tax-free and they think no FICA, no Fed, no state, no. Yeah. So no.
That's a great clarification, because I can definitely.
This is where HR is going to have work to do. Okay. So the next one is enhanced deduction for seniors. Right. So in the original iteration of this, they were trying to figure out a way to not tax Social Security. And they couldn't do it. Couldn't make it work. So they came up with this. And this is actually a whole lot better than trying to not tax Social Security. It's a whole lot cleaner. So this one also sunsets in 2028. And it's an additional deduction. So it's just an added deduction of $6,000 up to $75K in earnings. Okay, so it's a lower threshold. So it's clearly pointed at, it's really pointed right at people who are pretty much living just on Social Security. That's clearly the target, right? Because if you saved a lot for retirement, $75K in additional savings, like you had IRAs and stuff like that, if you saved for 25 years or something like that, you should be able to pull that together. You know what I mean? So it's capping it there. And then earnings for an individual age 65 or older, and it's $150K for joint filers. Okay. But this all says sunsets in 2028. Now, the key thing here for HR, so I'm going to stop right here and really talk about no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, and this one right here. My frame of reference for this goes all the way back to Bill Clinton and HIPAA. So neither one of you remember this.
You said Bill Clinton and who?
HIPAA.
HIPAA. Okay. HIPAA.
When HIPAA was first passed, nobody talked about the privacy components of it. That wasn't the headline. That wasn't a big deal. It really wasn't mentioned that much. The big news was the first P, portability. And so what HIPAA did was basically say, if you had if you had insurance, however many months you had insurance, prior to joining an employer, that employer and all insurance plans back then had pre-existing condition exclusions, meaning if you were in a continuum of care and you were being treated for something, then when you joined a new health insurance plan, that health insurer was off the hook for a full year. And none of that would be covered until you'd been with the company for a year. And those were common structures, very common structures designed to keep the cost of insurance low. What HIPAA did was basically say, hey, if you had health insurance, let's say you had health insurance, Tracy, for 12 months. Heck, you'd held health insurance for years. And you go get employment at a new employer. You want to get on their health insurance plan. They have a pre-existing exclusion clause. You would simply, under HIPAA, show proof that you had insurance for 12
coverage
months,
for it.
and that would reduce the pre-existing exclusion clause by those number of months. So if you'd had insurance for 12 consecutive months, the pre-existing exclusion was completely eliminated. That was a big deal. That was a huge deal. But here's how President Clinton actually said that. Okay, so I just explained that to you, right? Here's what he said on national television. Under this law, if you like your insurance, you can keep it into your next job. Okay, that's not what HIPAA did. That's not what HIPAA did at all.
Because of the portability, he kind of thought that it meant.
I don't know what the hell he was thinking, but he got on national television and said that. And the reason I remember that, now I knew I was tracking the law. I knew exactly what it said. And when he said that, I just about spit out my Coke. Because for the next, I swear to God, for the next 8 months after that, new employees coming to my company.
Oh, wow.
We would talk to them in HR orientation about our health insurance. They go, no, I'm just keeping mine. Like, we can't actually do that.
You're like, no, it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. Yeah,
no. I saw President Clinton say,
oh, gosh.
I heard that for months.
That's funny. I mean, not funny, but funny, because, he probably really wanted to come off smart because, portability, he just guessed.
Here's
insurance is portable.
This is where HR pros are going to have to be on the ball. This is about communication. This is a huge communication challenge for HR. Because when they hear no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, they think they mean it. We mean no taxes at all right now. Okay. How all of this is resolved is on your annual tax file.
Okay.
So when you pay your taxes, and what's going to happen is all the payroll companies are going to adjust the W-2, and it's going to capture boxes that HR Block is going to ask about on their product, and basically say, okay, did you work overtime? That'll be one of the questions on the tax form, on the tax interview. And if so,
okay.
And employers are going to have to report. I'm quite confident they're going to have to report on the W-2 the exempt amount of overtime. Just
question, and maybe this is a dumb question. I apologize.
No dumb questions.
No dumb questions.
No
one of
such
my
thing.
weaknesses. I barely made it through Fed tax in law school. So we've got the 12,500 individual deduction already, right? When we're filing our taxes at the end of the year.
Yes.
So add on, is this are individuals getting the tip deduction going to get 12.5 plus 18.5 on that income, or is there overlap between the 12.5 and the 18.5? So there's really only they're seeing 6,000.
It's a six. It's a six. So basically, let's say that someone made. Let me back up. Got to get that slide on overtime. Yeah. So it's up to $12,500. So let's say you got somebody that factory worker made $60,000 that year, of that 60 total that they earned. Let's say 10,000 of it came out of overtime.
Okay.
So that falls under that $12,500 threshold. So they'll be able to reduce their taxable income by 10K right there.
And when I was looking at this and trying to wrap my mind around it, one of the other things that I saw with respect to overtime is that it's only the overtime premium, which may also be a messaging issue, because people are going to assume, okay, I made, $10,000 in overtime generally, which includes that flat rate.
No, it's the overtime premium.
Oh, just the premium.
Yeah.
Yes, because remember, overtime is time.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Time plus 1/2.
That's right.
This is why I think they're going to have to separate it on the W-2, because nobody's going to be able to figure that out on their own.
What? Yeah. That was kind of misleading too, because you hear that.
I think they're going to have to make it super clear, so that if you're doing your taxes with HR Block, I'm just using HR Block as an example. They're the most popular one, right? But you'll get to a point in the interview. It says on your W-2 for overtime, if a number appears in box 12A, place that here. It's going to have to be like that. So good call out, Rachel. That is
the premium.
Overtime premium, not the base pay.
And I think when I was trying to do some math on some of this, because you're watching all the social media comments, and I'm like, okay, what's really happening? Obviously it's a net positive for people.
Oh,
indisputable. But the overall impact, really, at the end of the day, when you take in the reality, there's going to be Medicare taken out, there's going to be Social Security taken out. It's not going to be very significant.
Well, okay, so excellent.
Because it's the premium and not the full.
Hang on a second. Excellent point. In real time, meaning your paycheck, this is entirely neutral. Nothing counts. Okay. So my call out here is, and this is where it becomes a calculation. This is where HR's role is really beyond the education piece, because it is very clear that the intention of the administration is to try to put money in people's pocket in real time. But that's not what any of these do. They're not designed that way. That would have been too complex. They're resolving it on the tax form. So what would happen, what I would do if I were working I still worked for other people, and with my manufacturing people, and we had pretty predictable overtime, so this was easy. But I would schedule a training with these folks and say, okay, here's the law, here's what it means, here's the portion it is that they're talking about. And so the real question is, guys, this: if you want this money in real time, anything approaching real time, then you're going to have to, then what you want to do is decrease the money being taken out of your paycheck for federal taxes. So you can
W-4
now comfortable that you'll land near the pin here. Or if you don't feel like taking the risk, you just wait, and the refund is what the refund is. Right.
And my only concern with that messaging, Chris, is that I think some people are going to be presumptive that the impact of the deduction is going to be much more significant than
absolutely. Which is why I'm saying if HR's got to get in front of this, because the way people are, if I look at this, and I grew up working in factories, I grew up blue collar, I know how they think, because I thought that way, right?
Yeah.
If I read this at 18 years old when I was working at General Motors, 19 years old, General Motors, I would have expected that my overtime, all of it, the base pay plus premium, that on my paycheck, that would not receive any federal tax that week.
Yeah.
That week. That's going to be my expectation looking at this, because nobody on the factory floor, I guarantee you, knows payroll as well as payroll knows payroll. So this is going to be a messaging thing, because their expectations are here.
Yeah.
And the reality is different. Now, how it nets out in the wash mathematically, to your point, Rachel, is going to be an absolute positive.
Yeah.
I'm 100% of that. And the materiality depends, quite frankly, on how much overtime is worked. Yeah. And how many people in the household are working overtime. So
for clarification here, so the overtime is the premium,
Correct.
And then it's not something that people will experience right now. It'll be resolved through the annual tax filings. That's when you'll see the benefits. Okay.
Is going to get any kind of benefit out of this in real time.
Is that W-4?
If they adjust their federal tax contribution.
Okay.
And I love your example of GM because I was thinking of, I know I keep saying I have 4 daughters. So one of my son-in-laws works at GM. And I was thinking of him specifically because I'm like, but he's, you know, in fairness, he's making 6 figures working at GM because he works thirds, he picks up overtime. And so
I did the same thing.
Yeah. So I want to sit down with him and have that conversation. So I worry for him. You know, he's going to be expecting much more in return than I think he's actually going to get, because once you get into that higher tax bracket on a lot of those.
It is really pointed all throughout this bill. This bill is pointed right at the modestly compensated working class. Time and time, everything I'm seeing here is pointed right at them. They are not worried and don't do much here for wealthy people per se, regardless of what's going on. There's just not a lot there. They preserve the tax code. I mean, the tax brackets don't change, right? So they preserve that. And there are people who argue that 37% is enough. It should be more, but those are arguments about how much you tax, right? Not so much other stuff. But when you as I looked at elements of these, man, it just screams blue collar every inch of the way. Workforce Pell, no tax on tips, no.
Let me ask you about that. I saw one. I've been trying to read as much as I can to come up to speed with it, but my knowledge on these issues is just rudimentary. So I saw one analogy that said someone making $50,000 a year could expect to receive $300 benefit. And now I thought, well, that's difficult to skew, because what are we talking about? Are we talking, is that person a tip wage earner? Is that an overtime?
Yes.
Wow, 300 though.
So when you spread it out across the entire workforce, you're going to get lower numbers.
Yeah. So
I think how much this matters is really going to be heavily dependent upon the factor and the industry that the employee works in.
Okay.
More than
that's less than 1%, right? 1% of that would be 500. So, but then there was another calculation for someone earning $1 million, and it said that person would benefit 90,000, which is about 9%. And I thought, well, where is that coming from? Can you give any insight into that?
No. Well, I think that goes back to the argument that 37% isn't enough of a tax.
Okay. So it's kind of maintaining the status quo.
Yeah. So that's what they did. Yeah. They just basically took the Trump tax, the first Trump administration tax plan.
Okay.
And reauthorize. Well, actually they made it permanent. So, which permanent is in DC depends upon a Congress, right?
Sure.
Whether or not. So anyway, so there's that. So big doings in Section 127. So this is another one SHRM has been pushing. So Section 127 is a section of the tax code that employers have always used to receive credits for costs associated with employee development, right? So typically when employees would go out and take maybe a course at Ivy Tech or something like that, the employer said, hey, you need to learn how to do this, right, to be more effective in your job. And so employers would typically say you can do this for up to $1,500. Employers typically do it to manage cash, not so much the federal limit. But that is what Section 127 has been used for decades. Okay.
Is that the standard tuition reimbursement or the 5250 cap, or is that something different?
So this is no, you're correct. That's part of this. So part of what they did was increase it, right?
Okay. So what's that? What is that 50-52 cap?
So the 5,520 is what it's increased to in 2026. So unlike the others that are 2025, this is 2026.
Okay. So
Okay.
it was 5250. They've raised it to
To
55.
55.20.
Just
And
Oh,
most
okay.
importantly, so not only did they raise it, they put it on an inflation adjusted going forward. So it's on an
Okay.
automatic escalator, which had never done before. So
And this is the accumulated amount, like all of, that's the cap.
well, 5,520 is the cap.
Oh, okay.
per employee.
Per employee.
Per employee. Okay.
And
Okay.
that was flat for like 10 years, wasn't it?
Yes, for a long
Okay.
time. So this is something SHRM has been screaming to raise this number for like a decade. Pushing to do it, pushing to get it inflation adjusted, and boom, here it is, right? But here's the big deal. They have cemented into this the employer ability to pay their employees student loans through this vehicle and write those off. So this is a huge deal because the average student loan payment is $500 a month, and the increase goes to $55.20 on the year per person, which would basically paper over the company cost for making the loan payment.
That's a great hiring incentive.
That's a
That is.
deal. That is when I saw that. So that's another thing SHRM had wanted. So as I'm going through this bill, I'm like, I argued for that. I argued for that. I argued for that.
Yeah. Wow.
So this is a big deal. Now, this is not to say employers will do it per se, but you're, in essence, what the government is doing is say it's okay with us if you want to launder the
well, because you're laundering it back to the government, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's basically what you're doing.
Does that,
it's
are private loans included?
It says,
And when you say private loans, like private school loans?
Okay. Excellent question. So Rachel's question actually goes to student loans issued before President Obama, right? Because
or refinanced.
Pardon me?
Or refinanced through like
refinanced. Yeah. But student loans were federalized under President Obama. Prior to that, it was purely a private market, right? Well, quasi.
My student loan debt says otherwise, but
yeah. I said quasi. Yeah. So I should say the debt was federalized. Put it that way.
Yeah.
But at any rate, I haven't read anything. I'll go back and look at the bill, but I did not see anything drawing a distinction.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's something as an employer that I think I'll be talking to my team about, because it is a very competitive environment hiring young attorneys right now. And I think that's a great opportunity for us to take that credit and be able to offer that. So
because
as opposed to just wages, I mean, we're just all.
Oh, this is
because wages is not the only benefit, right? Like there's other things. Yeah.
Well, I remember when, and I can't remember who it was, Carl Ulrichs was talking about it, but this one company was giving employees the option of either the employer paying the student debt or matching their 401k. They had different 401k plans. And so they said you pick. You want the retirement match, or do you want us to do these? Because they were about equal numbers, I guess, the way they figured it. Mm-hmm. So, but yeah, this really opens. This is exactly the kind of stuff, Tracy, we advocate for. Remember, I always talk about put tools in our toolbox.
Mm-hmm. And this is a great tool.
Tell us how to use them and don't make us do anything, but put tools in the toolbox. So this is a real good example of putting a tool in the toolbox and going to the employers and say, do what you will.
Right. Now, what would stop? Would cash flow? Would cash flow be the only reason?
I think,
okay.
Yeah.
Any other reasons besides?
I think this really benefits larger employers and employers that have enough free cash flow to do it.
Yeah. Question.
What are you going to say, Rachel? Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I'm like, okay. Now, so that 5520, does the employee have to reflect that as wages at the end of the year? I mean, is that benefit inferred?
I don't see how. No, because they don't do it under Section 127 right now.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking. I'm thinking if we're just paying.
Yeah, I know. No, they
alone,
parked this. They built this into 127, and the way the 127 is built, it's purely an employer credit thing. It's totally silent on the employee. Always has been.
That's That I'm really intrigued by that. I think that's a really wonderful.
Yeah. This is just for the employer. Section 127 is just applies to employers.
Okay.
Now, it'd be interesting to see what kind of arguments the IRS might want to make in a year or two. But
Now we have about 15 minutes.
Sorry, I got to jump.
No, you're okay. Just want to make sure that,
Oh, and then the last
stay on top
one is just, and this one blew me away because this is a blowout number. So they have created a paid FMLA credit. So this applies to employers. And so basically, the way they built this thing is that you can, for all intents and purposes, now at higher compensation levels, a percentage would make a difference. But the way I'm looking at it is you just take your garden variety employee making 45 grand a year, right? I think it's far more realistic in terms of looking at this. So the way I looked at the way this credit is built, let's say you had a salaried employee making 45K, they go on FMLA for all 12 weeks. Well, let's just say it's childbirth. They have 2 weeks of accrued leave, so they use that. And then the employer turns around and pays the balance, the 10 weeks, which leaves the employer on the hook for $8,564, right? Because that's the salary for those 10 weeks. Yeah. They can take every penny of that as a credit against the taxes they would owe to the federal government. And the credit is capped at a whopping $650K a year.
Wow.
That's a blowout number. They are begging employers to pay for FMLA, freaking begging them.
That, that's incredible, because now we're seeing that, coming from the White House. And then we have, we talked, I think last time, about what Governor Braun is doing at the state level. That's strictly for government employees, but still there's really a big push on paid leave.
So this is for this being a Republican bill, and I'll use that term nominally for these purposes. Yeah. I have never in my lifetime seen a more populist piece of legislation pushed at benefiting the working class, just throughout.
And so why do you use the word populist to describe this? Why do you use the word populist to describe it?
SHRM is a traditional Republican. It isn't a established Republican by any stretch. By any stretch. No, this is populist legislation, and I think that's you've heard me say before, Tracy. We are in a populist swing. The nation goes through these roughly every 75 to 100 years. The last parallel we had for this, when it was the Republicans on the populist side, was Teddy Roosevelt.
Wow.
And that's when you had national parks created. That's when you had trusts busted up. That's when you had massive defense spending, built that 300 ship Navy, right? I mean, you go back and look at Teddy Roosevelt and see what he did in the first 2 years after he was in charge, and the river runs through it. Yeah. So those are the implications for HR out of the BBB. And then as we start speaking, you and I, Tracy, I think have like 4 speaking engagements coming up in the next 2 months. We're going to have to talk to HR people about how they have to talk about these things to their people, because it's, I think it's going to be very easy for them to misinterpret and feel like this isn't a good thing when actually it probably is for them. But it's going to take rationalization. It's going to take explanation. And
resetting their expectations, it sounds like. Yeah. Go ahead, Rachel.
In a round table with, it was actually a NYRA kind of sponsored event, and we met with a foundation, the Don Wood Foundation, and another organization that's trying to figure out how to reinvigorate reinvigorate adult learners to go back to school and finish their education.
Oh, okay.
And we talked about in that roundtable about these tuition reimbursement programs. And I said at the time, it's 5250. It's been flat for like over a decade. But I find in my practice, and I have over 100 clients, that they're underutilized. And there were some questions flying around. Why? And I said, well, I think part of it is, unless you're intentional about it, I want you to get educated to move into this role that we have available. You're kind of incentivizing your employee to better themselves and leave you. Now we have these programs in place that like limit when they can leave, they have to repay it back. But I think a lot of employers are scared of it. But this now opens up more opportunity.
Well, one of the restrictions that's still present, and this is one of the reasons why it's underutilized, Rachel. It's not supposed to be positioning you for the next job. It's helping you be more effective in the job you're currently in.
Okay, so I think that means now I have to pay you more, right? So one of the ways
interesting. Okay.
Employers have typically got around these things is to say, well, you'd be more effective in your job in accounting, you'd be more effective in your job in operations or HR, whatever the heck it is, if you had an MBA.
Okay.
And then they turn right around and promote them after they get it, right? I mean, it's how you structure it. But I think
is that in the legislation? I'm sorry to interrupt. Is that
that's existing legislation? That's always been part and parcel of that section.
I've never read it completely. Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, that's always been the break, always been the issue in it, because the motivation is employees to say, I want to get to this job, so I want to take this course that is completely unrelated to my current job.
Right.
Well, you can, but you can't, therefore, turn around. The company can't turn around and then launder it through 127.
I would
Which
say
doesn't mean the company couldn't pay for it. You just can't run it through 127.
Oh, so just clarification real quick. So because Rachel brought up being able to leverage that benefit if they're going to be promoted to a higher level. So, and you're saying, no, that's not how it works. That's not how it works. Interesting.
But it's absolutely what's happening. Whether they're supposed to do it or not, they're doing it.
Because I would think that would. Yeah. Okay.
Having said that, how I always got around that piece, the argument now, that was never contested. And I'm unaware of the government ever asking a single bleeping question about Section 127 before. I don't think it's on anybody's audit radar, but I'm just saying how it's written.
Yeah. No.
Okay.
Clarification.
What I always did was
thank you for that question, Rachel.
I had a very broad and generous structure for my perceptions of what would help in a current job.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And if another position opens,
it wouldn't be bad. It wouldn't be bad to be gunned up like this. Yes.
Yeah. Right.
Wow. Interesting.
It wouldn't be bad.
Yeah.
But you're right. It's HR says it's there, but it really requires a motivated individual to pursue it.
Yeah. And I think that rarely is the individual going to do it. It probably should be coming from the employer, but employers aren't really being intentional about encouraging their employees. From my experience, I see these policies all the time, but I rarely see my clients and utilize them.
Yeah.
Now I've also seen
HR. I always saw this being employee. It was always employees walking into HR and saying, hey, I remember you guys talked about this during orientation. Tell me how that works again. What can I do? And then usually they talk to their manager. One of the things that cuts back on it is that it's really great for people gaining skill and understanding around something that they don't know or that they're weak on is probably the best way to put it. Right.
Yeah.
Now I've seen it happen where the policy is that the employee has to pay for it first, and then so I can see that being a reason why maybe some employee there
are employers that have that and say, hey, how I always designed it was I had a two-way thing of doing it, and it was based on money. So if it was if the investment that the company was going to make was $500 or less, then we just paid for it. That was just all there was to it. If there was more to it, if that was going to be more than that, and oftentimes then that got into a couple of thousand or whatnot, then we fronted half of the money and the employee fronted half of the money. And then when the employee completed the course of study and got a passing grade, then I paid the balance.
See, now that's I think that improves accessibility to be able to leverage that. Yeah.
I mean, but the point is that the policy is basically up to the company.
Yeah.
Okay.
There were lots of companies that said, hey, it's pure reimbursement, whatever it costs, you got to front it. And most employees can't front anything.
Yeah. Or they got to take out loans, and then there's
and then it's self-defeating. And again, so it has its place. It absolutely helps. But again, to me, the big the big deal was parking the student loan payments under that. I did not see that coming.
No, that's exceptional. So I'm really excited to talk to my clients about that too.
Yep.
So
I didn't mean to eat so much time. I apologize.
Now, are we okay to, just to talk about the Trump v. CASA, Rachel, are you okay with that? Get that? Okay. Because I'd like to talk about, because I know that I looked that up and it's confusing to me. And I think in full transparency, and I think that, this is something that people have probably received through the SHRM e-blast or email. So if we could talk about that, that'd be great. Go ahead, Rachel.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I kind of want to start with the executive order that prompted all of this. And then we'll talk a little bit about what a nationwide injunction is on its face. So Executive Order 14160 challenges national birthright citizenship as we know it today under the 14th Amendment. And I'll read from it. It says the 14th Amendment has never been interpreted to extend citizenship universally to everyone born within the United States. And that I think some people may disagree with that statement, but that's what the executive order says. And then it goes on to say that it is always excluded from birthright citizenship persons who were born in the United States, but not subject to the jurisdiction thereof. And that is what this administration is relying on, that last piece of that sentence, subject to the jurisdiction thereof. This was, the 14th Amendment came about because of a Supreme Court decision in 1857, which was Dred v. Scott, that determined that enslaved people were not citizens of the United States and did not have the benefits of citizenship. And so then in 1868, Congress ratified the 14th Amendment, and we have since operated. I'm unfamiliar with any other circumstances where people have not been given birthright citationship, and maybe you know of some, Chris.
Actually, no, I know exactly where that comes from.
Okay.
If you go back and read the original, and you can, it's discoverable. If you go back and read as that bill was being argued and as it was being built, right? Because everything goes to the same mill,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
Everyone argues about it. And they were crystal clear when you look at the people talking about how to smith the language.
Mm-hmm.
It was crystal clear if you read it that they were trying to write it in such a way that it only addressed the former slaves.
Okay.
And they did not want to, by any stretch, and there were big arguments about, hey, wait a minute, just being born here doesn't make you that. We don't want to do that. We're just trying to fix this. And so, but they kept on bumping into how they drafted it. But they had a heck of a time drafting it because people kept on saying, wait a minute, I think it means this if you say that. And they went back and forth a lot.
So are you aware of any circumstances since
None.
that time where anyone has been denied birthright citizenship?
None, because it's not been tested.
Right. Okay.
It's not been tested. So there's no doubt in my mind that the convention around it and the general acceptance around it has been that if you're born here, you're here. But if you read how that bill was put together, they for sure did not mean that.
Okay.
So that's the difference between convention and illegal.
Yeah, well, and then you've got 150 years of a pattern and practice.
Yeah,
and
but
then,
when this is argued, I can guarantee you it's going to go right back to that.
Yeah.
That language is going to be argued. I guarantee you.
Well,
So Rachel, make that comment again. What did the executive order say about birthright citizenship again?
So it's hanging on this last part of the sentence, which says the 14th Amendment has always excluded from birthright citizenship persons who were born in the United States, but not, and in quotes, subject to the jurisdiction thereof. So that is language taken from the 14th Amendment.
Yep.
And I now understand that what they're relying on is when the amendment was constructed, the discussion behind it was intended only to protect these enslaved people, and not everyone.
That line, getting that
and
line
not everybody else.
That very line you put in there was the one where they were trying to establish that. I mean, that's how they landed on that language.
However, what has happened in practice since it was enacted is that everyone born in the United States has inherently or automatically been given birthright citizenship.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's the distinction between the convention and the practice and the law. So and that's what's going to be argued.
Okay, and what Trump has proposed is that people do not automatically. The birthright citizenship does not automatically extend to persons born in the United States. One, when that person's mother was unlawfully present in the United States and the father was not a United States citizen or lawful permanent resident at the time of said person's birth. Or two, when that person's mother's presence in the United States at the time of said person's birth was lawful but temporary. And this is where I think there's going to be a lot of pushback, such as, but not limited to, visiting the United States under the auspices of the Visa Waiver Program, or visiting on a student visa, work visa, or tourist visa, and the father was not a United States citizen or lawful permanent resident at the time. So either one of your parents has to be either a permanent resident or a United States citizen for you to have birthright citizenship. Being here legally for 10 years under a work visa is not sufficient to justify birthright citizenship. Right. The way this is.
Right.
So,
that's the argument. Yep. That's the core of the argument. Yep.
Yeah. So this was scheduled to be enacted 30 days after it was issued. And I'm not sure I have the actual January 20th, the White House, January 20th. Okay. And then of course a slew of lawsuits come out. 22 states filed lawsuits, and several individuals within those states have also filed lawsuits. What happened was a nationwide injunction stemming from 3 of those lawsuits, 3 district courts. So district court, for those who aren't familiar with that, if I sit in Fort Wayne, Indiana, so we have a federal courthouse here. And I could go there, file my lawsuit, and our chief judge, Holly Brady, is our district judge, our Article 3 judge there. And she could have enacted one of these injunctions in that district court, and it would have been had this same nationwide effect. So obviously you've got district courts there in Indy and Terre Haute. They're throughout the state. So that happened in 3 states, and those nationwide injunctions put a halt to this executive order completely across the nation. And some examples of that happening historically in the recent past have been during the COVID era, which we all get a little twitch in our eye when we talk about. But you may remember a federal vaccine mandate for federal contractors. That was a very hot topic. It was litigated. Same thing happened in that case. There was a nationwide injunction. By the time it was hashed out, the COVID pandemic was over. And so it was a non-issue, and it went away. Another example that most HR professionals are probably familiar with was the FTC's ban on non-competes. Another situation where a nationwide ban was put in place.
That's the one.
Yeah, and by the time, I think that was in September of 24, the Trump administration had taken over. The FTC pulled it back completely. It's a non-issue. So both of those are examples. This is not new. Before this, we talked a little bit about how other presidents have had similar bans. Obviously, I just gave 2 examples that fell within the Biden administration. I did some research, and Chris did too. I think Biden had 14. Trump has had 63. I think was the number I came with. Mm-hmm. So, and this is
and counting,
and that is an example of the numerous executive orders and, really fast action that his administration has taken place. But that's combined with what he did in his last administration too. So that's not all right now.
Oh, okay. So, okay. So
yeah, not just in the last 7 months.
Not in the last 150 days or so. Okay.
Most of them, though, I would say, frankly. So in this case, we've got the executive order, we've got the injunctions, and the Trump administration is challenging not the substance of what the executive order stands for in these injunctions, but the injunction itself. And what they have said is, hey, wait a second, district court in New Jersey, you don't have the authority to tell the rest of the country what they can do. And so that is the issue. And that is the only issue that the Supreme Court took up when they addressed this. And so many people have thought, or there have been headlines and, that, oh, geez, the executive order is going through, birthright citizenship is dead. That's absolutely not true, not right now, at least. So, in fact, the injunctions are still in place for those 22 states and those individuals who brought the claims. It just does not expand nationwide. And the court said that is, basically this nationwide authority from one district court is overbroad. It never should have been sanctioned. The first instance of that at least Justice Amy Coney Barrett identifies in her opinion stemmed from a case in 1963. And since then, there have been decisions where the court has questioned whether that authority did exist, should exist.
Right.
And in a 19-page opinion that really delves back into the 1700s and how we got to this place. If you want some light reading, it's a great opinion. And it really is and I say that lightly. It's a well-written opinion. It helps you understand how the court came to this logic, whether you agree with it or not. It definitely holds your hand and walks you through the history of this issue.
You'd think Coney Barrett was a law professor or something.
You would, yeah, absolutely.
And it makes sense. It makes sense. Why should one state get to control what all the other states do? Makes sense. But then how does that impact HR, right? That relies on that consistency, that standardization.
And keep in mind, it's not a state. So it is the federal government. These are federal judges interpreting federal laws. And so that's where the dissent has said, we've given these judges the authority to make these decisions. And if there is a stop to something that the executive is doing that a judge thinks is illegal, it should impact the nation until we can get to the merits and figure out. And the other, the majority, the 6 said, no, it's overbroad. It never should have been. And so we're going to put a stop to it now. And there's examples as to why, both sides feel the way they do.
Yeah. And Tracy, these are part and parcel of the constant tension we've had due to the design of our government, right? And
it was designed intentionally that way.
Power up, right? And so we see these junctures and so here you have a collision to a certain degree of where what is the edge, right? Where does one impugn on the other? And the framers did a real good job of delineating some of those, in particular as applies to the legislature and the executive is where they did the best job. But but you have a tension here, right? You have under the Constitution, the executive has very specific duties and responsibilities that are outlined of what they can and they can't do. And so then you have to ask yourself a question, okay, to what degree does the courts have to enter into and prevent somebody from executing what they see as their duties and responsibilities under their applicable section of the Constitution? And this happened right off the bat, right? Marbury v. Madison. I mean, we just, this got kicked off from the very beginning,
which
right?
is cited in this opinion.
Yeah, right.
Mm.
As it should be, right? I mean,
Yeah.
if you're going all the way back, if you're going back that far, you don't mention Marbury, you missed the mark. But,
Yeah.
And you said 1700, right? Is that what you said, Rachel?
1764. They're talking about where some of these laws stemmed from England, and it's.
Let me write that down.
Yeah,
this is
1764.
President Madison, the dad Madison, not the son Madison.
Okay.
Both of them were president, but this tension is constant. And the other thing I'll tell you too, Tracy, because Rachel mentioned it, but it bears reiterating. Not every district judge issues an injunction over the entire nation over what is before them. It's far more common for the injunctions to be affecting only the parties and in the jurisdiction that judge has. That is the daily bread of most federal judges. And up until probably 30 odd years ago, it was very rare for federal judges to go so far as to do nationwide injunctions. It was a really high bar to do that. And that has eroded over time, and you've seen more and more of that, right? And then we got to the crescendo that we have right now.
And admittedly, when the first time that I really delved into this issue was with the federal contractor vaccine matter, because I needed to give my clients solid advice, and it was unclear initially whether this was a nationwide ban. It was a decision out of Texas, I think.
Yes.
And so I'm going, can they do that? Right? Like, actually, is this the time where they can do that? And it wasn't clear, because there has been confusion within the Supreme Court and other appellate courts, and of whether how broad that power goes.
Well, you may remember when we had the last salary floor injunction, that case also originated in Texas, and the federal judge that had that case in Texas enjoined and put the injunction in place only for the plaintiffs in the case and in his jurisdiction.
And I think that was the Ryan v.
one
that I was talking about. That's the Ryan v. case.
And then it went to the circuit court, and that was the guy that nuked it for the nation.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Ryan v. Reynolds?
Is it Ryan? It's Ryan v. something. What is it? You said Ryan Reynolds.
Ryan Reynolds was a plaintiff in a case, but I think it had to do with his.
Oh yeah, and him and his wife. But I know that's a whole other show.
That's a whole
other law case.
Aviation Gen, I think.
So,
it is. Yeah.
Going back to CASA, what the court did, though, and they've been doing this a lot frequently with a lot of these injunctions, is they're saying, you didn't come to us in the right form. Your procedure was wrong. If you want to come back, consider these options that we're presenting. One is as a class action, which could be nationwide. And so that's what Justice Comey Barrett focused on. Justice Kavanaugh suggested using the Administrative Procedure Act as an alternative.
I saw that. Yeah.
And what is that with the Administrative Procedure Act?
The Administrative Procedure Act. Oh, I had something printed out. Chris, do you have that?
I don't have it in front of me now.
It allows.
I just remember he was one that piped up about that. Yeah.
Yeah, it allows you to bypass the governing agency that's creating a law. It's something that I think was identified or talked about a lot with Chevron, and so it's a way to get around through procedure, which is what's in the title, and to get to the end goal, which is really to argue the case on its merits. So that is not going to, don't quote me on that. I have all these notes, and
so that's what you were saying earlier, the APA.
Yeah, the APA.
That's the APA. So, okay. And I got it here. So it's a foundational federal law governing how federal agencies propose and establish regulations, as well as how the public and courts can challenge agency actions.
Yeah, that's why you said Chevron. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's typically focused on an agency. Now here we have the executive, but Kavanaugh was saying you can still apply the APA.
You could still apply that. Yeah.
So it's it's kind of.
But he was the only one that said that, right? I didn't see anybody else signing up for that.
Yeah, I don't know. And I have to go back. There were so many. I mean, there was 119 pages total.
Yeah, and I did
opinion.
not read them all.
Yeah,
I read
3.
I read the, yeah.
No. Yeah. So
it's there.
Tomorrow, there is oral arguments in New Hampshire on the same issue, and everyone is waiting to see whether the argument changes based on, and really it has to, based on what's happened in the CASA decision. And so are the plaintiffs going to either argue a class or try to get through with the APA? We don't know. Yeah. So, that's kind of hold your breath and wait and see.
Yeah, we'll see.
And I'd also like to add that, this is consistent. This decision is consistent in what we've seen from the Trump administration and the Supreme Court thus far, like in the last 7 months. Very few decisions from the Supreme Court have been based on the merits of the substantive law or facts in front of them. Almost everything has been focused on procedure.
Yep.
And the two that stand out to me are Ames, which was, Title VII, and the other is the Tennessee case challenging transgender healthcare for youth. And they decided to leave that to the states. So other than that, I can't think of anything off the top of my head that was really the meat of what to expect. And so we're all still waiting to see how much power this administration is going to be given.
Yep. Yeah. But very, very good observation that the court is not what they're basically saying. How I've kind of looked at it is,
they're kind of like, that's not what we do.
We're not looking at your argument, but what we're telling is that you're doing it the wrong way.
Okay.
And
okay.
So here's the avenue you should be pursuing, kind of thing. So you're right. They're not making decisions on merit and stuff like that. And it's interesting because they announced, I don't know if you saw, Rachel, they announced they're picking up a case on transgender youth in sporting leagues.
I did see a headline about that. So,
we're going to pick that one up, and boy, if you kind of look at the angle and the lane that the court has taken, I could easily see them saying, "Yeah, that's up to the states too."
Yeah, and I think being a plaintiff right now and looking at some of those issues, to your point, depending on what side you're on, you're going to make good law or bad law. If I were on that transgender side and advocating for that, I'd probably say, let's sit back and wait for some changes on the court, because right now, I don't.
There's not a majority for that. I concur.
No. So it's not going to end well.
Yeah. No. Read the room.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So wait until there's some changes in administration, possibly SCOTUS.
As much anything, is Thomas the oldest?
That's a good question. I don't know.
I think it's Thomas and Sotomayor are the two oldest. And I know Alito is another name that comes up all the time about possibly retiring.
Yeah.
So,
but we could have Congress could, change the legislation. They could modify Title VII to include transgender rights. There's a lot of options. It doesn't have to
include.
It's not just the court.
What did you say, Rachel? To include? You said to include what kind of rights?
Transgender rights.
Okay.
Said basically amend Title VII.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a lot of options. And now is not the time. At the end of the day.
No, and there aren't even any votes to do that.
Yeah. Anywhere. So if that's the goal, I don't understand the logic, frankly.
So does this impact the way that HR will consider compliance? Like, is this the same thing as the Chevron? Like, remember, Chris, when we talked about the Chevron deference, and now that impacts HR professionals because, HR professionals are used to the consistency of how the law is interpreted. But now because of.
Well, no. What I said,
okay.
What I said we were used to was it wasn't what the law says. It's what the guidance says.
And now it's going to go
Well,
back.
now there's
Each court's interpretation.
There's an expectation that the agencies, am I proper in saying that, Rachel, that there's an expectation? There's an expectation that the agencies will hew closer to the law than they have. This is why I think.
Okay. Because it's been two differences. Okay.
My betting money is this. I fully expect, and I could prove to be entirely wrong, but I fully expect that that this EEOC is going to look at the guidance that it provided on the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act and issue new guidance.
Yeah, I was, as you were talking, I was absolutely thinking about the EEOC and Andrea Lucas, who has mirrored Trump's executive orders in her guidance, and pushed forward, I think, the Ames case, as part of her agenda. And so now she's gotten it. And, as these transgender cases come through, I think she will also see successes, and it will be consistent with her guidance. So there won't be, and that's kind of the benefit of having the executive, the legislative, and the judicial all of the same mind, because it is all going to align.
Because then you get clarity. And what I've always said, Tracy, for HR pros, it's we need to know our operating environment, right? Because our opinion in these things really doesn't matter very much. It's what is the enforcement? I always said, what is the guidance? What is the enforcement position? And what are these government agencies expecting to see? And that is the reality we manage it. That's all there is to it. Right. And I think Rachel's point was a real good one. It sure is a heck of a lot easier for us when everything lines up. Now, you may not like how it lines up, and you may have a different opinion about it and stuff like that.
But I think it'll make it easier if it all lines up.
It brings clarity.
Yeah. To at least understand.
Yeah. I know when I talk to my clients, I always like to have clarity.
Yeah. I've got to say, I don't think there's anything easy about what's happened over the last 6 months. Maybe it will, things will calm down over the next year, but we've talked about like the paradigm shift, and people are what is the right thing to do. And again, all I can say is equality, treat everyone the same, make sure everything is documented, document like you, and hopefully you've been doing that anyways, but more so now than ever.
I think one of the biggest mind shifts for HR, you just hit the nail on the head, Rachel, like you do every single show. We have not done a single program where you haven't just nailed it.
God bless you. After the 32 comment and now this, Chris.
No, I'm dead serious. Here's the distinction that she just made. We in HR have been working under an equity model for the last decade. Now it's equality. Yeah. Those are two very different things. Very different. Absolutely. And equality is the name of the game now. And that is not equity.
I think it's always helpful to define both words, because I think that, for me, when I think of equality and equity, I still, to me, but then I came into HR pretty late. So I came in pretty, close to now. So, but
the best way I think to think about it at just a very simplistic and high level is equality is typically focused around opportunity, and equity is focused around outcomes.
Yeah, and I think we talked last time. We had the baseball analogy, right?
Yes.
And that was very helpful. So it is uncertain times, I think, and until the Supreme Court hashes out the merits of many of the things that are flowing in front of them, I think my advice to my clients is just hold tight.
Do you think they have the appetite for merit?
I don't.
What does that mean when you said the appetite for merit? What does that mean?
So, I think certain members of the court have the appetite for merit. Let me be specific. I don't think Chief Justice Roberts has an appetite for merit.
I think that's fair. It would be their preference to push it back, back to the appellate court, to the district court, or to the states to figure it out. They do not view themselves as rule makers, as
no, they're not the burger court.
Yeah, they are.
That's true.
Yeah, they're procedural, and they will interpret the laws that are in front of them as they are written.
Do you remember from Roberts's confirmation hearing when they were probing as to what he would be like a chief justice? I'll never forget this.
I have to say,
he looked at him dead in the eye and said, "I'm an umpire. I just call balls and strikes."
Okay. Well, he's held true to that, then.
He is held true to that.
Yeah.
He meant it.
Yeah. And, I think they've also shown, the justices have, and this isn't a Supreme Court analysis podcast, but while we're on the topic, they've shown their limits with the executive, what they're willing to tolerate from Trump and what they're not. I think that's part of this, is he's dipping his toe in the water with a lot of these things. They will not tolerate him attacking the judiciary. Roberts rarely speaks out, and he did in that instance. And so we haven't seen any more of that. I think Trump figured that out.
No. He learned it. Yes. Okay.
Yeah. No, I interpreted that as the president saying, "Quit dragging your feet."
Yeah. So.
Yeah, but you're right. They won't tolerate that.
And they also know with Justice Comey Barrett, they've got to be careful because she is not reliable. She's not loyal to either side. Although she leans right, she can go left.
Well, and she has on a couple of recent decisions. And I wouldn't say so much.
I kind of like that. I like that. You can rely on somebody to not be loyal to a party.
Yeah, tendency for right, left. She strikes me very much as a law professor in terms of how she goes about. I mean, it's who she was, right? And when you think about when you go, how they teach law students all the time, right? You're supposed to represent your clients and represent whoever it is you're with without prejudice, without passion, and these things, right? You're just supposed to go there. And she seems to me to kind of take that tack. I would totally agree with you that she's not doctrinaire in the slightest.
Yeah.
I like that.
So, she came from the Seventh Circuit. So,
good observation. Yeah.
Yeah. She'll actually be speaking in August at the Seventh Circuit holds it's a federal judiciary for all federal practitioners. You can go. It's an annual event in August.
Cool.
And so she's going to be coming and speaking. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that'll be neat.
It's in Chicago. Yeah. Do you still practice, Chris, or do you still have caregiver?
No. I don't. I'm not an attorney. I
thought you were an attorney. Oh, okay. So we get these.
No, I'm like all HR people who have to learn.
He's a political science professor.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I'm a poli-sci grad. I was pre-law in school, and I intended to go to law school. I didn't go.
Okay.
So that's why I like the diversity here.
But no, as an undergrad, I took procedure. I took 3 semesters of constitutional law. It was all prescribed. I went to IU and said, "I'm going to go to law school," and they go, "Here's your class schedule for the next 4 years."
Yeah. Fun stuff.
Yeah.
All right. Wow. So we are about time, but I think that, we might eventually just change it to 90 minutes if it works out that way.
Well,
but I'm happy that we got through all of this stuff that we were going to talk about today.
We might have to do it, and I'll tell you this why. I do not see this pace stopping.
Yeah.
I really don't. Selena Zito wrote a great piece 2 weeks ago. Her book is out now on the Butler, Pennsylvania, and the attempted assassination of the president. But one of the things that she wrote was that her belief, and she talks quite a bit to President Trump. Her belief is that he believes his life was spared by God to do great things, but that his mortality, he does not know how much time he'll have. He doesn't know if he'll be assassinated. He doesn't even know if he'll finish his 4 years. He's older. And so he feels like he has absolutely zero time to waste to get big things done. And so it's pedal to the metal. And I just don't see it slowing down. So yeah, we better make this an hour and a half, because I just expect it to just keep on coming and coming and coming and coming and coming.
Wow. Well, definitely we want everybody to keep coming back until next month.
Well,
the second Wednesday.
If Congress thinks they're done and want to take a victory lap because they got one bill passed, they got another thing coming, man. He's going to run them freaking ragged.
And we're talking about the big, beautiful bill. That's okay.
That sucked all the oxygen out of DC.
Okay. So then by next month, there's probably going to be a lot more. You think things will happen?
I can't even imagine the legislation he's got teed up that he wants them to run through. Yeah.
Interesting.
This is going to be crazy. Yeah, this is absolutely a must-watch podcast. I'll tell you that. It's not just HR. No, I'm dead serious. Nobody's giving this kind of content.
I know that's right. That's what we're doing
I
here.
don't think, not pointed at the practitioner, not pointed at the discipline. And I'm not throwing shade on SHRM here at all, but this isn't what SHRM does, right?
It's different, and yeah,
they do quarterly webinars, which are fantastic and great information. But I
think that's what I like about this show is that, we have diversity. We have a political science professor and somebody who's been in the HR role for many years. And then we have somebody who's also an HR, but also attorney, a lawyer, you know what I mean? And then you just have somebody like me who's just a curious person who wants to learn and make sure that this is accessible to more people than it usually is, because sometimes people just have a hard time understanding this stuff. It is so technical. Sometimes I'm like following and then I can go back and listen to the recording and say, okay, that's what they were talking about. Actually, Rachel, real quick, you said something about the Seventh Circuit, but the way that you said it sounded like it was significant enough when you said from the Seventh Circuit. What does that mean?
Tony Barrett was from the Seventh.
Yeah, Justice.
Okay.
Was an appellate court judge on the Seventh Circuit, and I'm a federal court nerd, so I sit on the local rules committee for the northern half of the state. I've been on appointment panels for our magistrate judges here locally, and I've been very fortunate to have some personal relationships with some of our judges. In fact, Judge Andrew Teal, who just is a magistrate judge, is a very close friend of mine, and really excited. He knew that I was doing this, and he was like, "Oh, I can be on the podcast."
Oh, that
what if you want to talk about, like,
if you want to like bring him on one day to talk about.
He just took the bench on Monday. I don't know what he would say. He can't talk about politics.
Right, of course. But,
and so, we have another magistrate out of South Bend, Joshua Kolar, is now sitting on the Seventh Circuit. We have a lot of Indiana presence there, and the Seventh Circuit has a reputation for being one of the most intelligent and respected circuits in the country. And
okay.
So, they often are the trendsetters. So, they've been at the forefront of social justice historically. And you can follow them and get a sense of what's to come.
Okay.
And the Supreme Court doesn't disagree with them very often. So,
it's not
okay, because I just noticed like the way that I just noticed a different change in your voice when you just said the Seventh Circuit, and then I kind of just let us keep going, but then I just wanted to bring it back to that. Like I noticed that. What was that about? And thank you so much.
Well,
okay, so trendsetters. Okay,
I think that we're really unique in that we're Wisconsin, Indiana, and Illinois. So you're red, blue, and purple, right? And so the makeup of that court, they are not known to be left-leaning or right-leaning. I mean,
okay,
right now, but so they're one of the more neutral courts where something is happening on the south half of the country, and you like automatically know what's coming, right? That's not true about the Seventh Circuit.
Correct.
Very thoughtful, diverse, and tend to be just pretty neutral. So
right, and the point
Oh, wow.
the point she was making was that when it comes to Justice Coney Barrett, her temperament on the court has reflected
Where she's
that experience.
okay.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
kind of what you would expect from somebody from the 7th. I would agree.
yeah.
Right.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Okay. Well, I'm
And
happy
she's
I
right.
asked
It's
that
a big
question.
deal. They are very rarely reversed. I can't remember.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure at some point they were, but no, they're not reversed. It's certainly
Mhm.
not anything like the 9th.
No, and the Sixth Circuit,
reversed.
yeah, and the Sixth Circuit has a good reputation too, which is
Oh,
right
I
next
would
to
agree.
us in Ohio. But the two don't always align, and so it's interesting
No.
to watch them kind of battle it out sometimes too, and that's what prompts a lot of these cases that go to
They go to the Supreme Court. Yeah.
Yeah, is because when
Okay.
you have circuit splits and they can't agree, the Supreme Court then will weigh in and say, okay, this is what the
Yeah,
law
let's sort it out.
I love that you're a federal court nerd. We're definitely going to exploit that.
Yeah, you added yourself.
Yeah, we are
Yeah.
definitely
We'll
going to. Okay,
leverage
that helps. Oh,
Yeah,
yes,
no.
because that would be helpful. Because I think that sometimes when you hear, talking about court, Supreme Court, District Court, Circuit Court, it's like, what? So I think maybe even talking about that on one episode would be super cool, just to kind of go through that and let Rachel totally geek out, and then I can just eat it all up. Yes.
Well, it's very valuable because remember,
Yes.
Tracy, I think I told you one time, I teach my students that when you're in HR, you have to solve what I call within the box. So one side of the box.
Yes,
are
I have it in my
federal courts
notes somewhere.
and the district courts. The other side of the box is company policy. Another side of the box is your state and local ordinances and things like that. Right?
Yes, you did. Yes,
Yeah,
I have that box.
Yeah, and then that's right. I sent you the box.
Yeah, we did
right?
it, but we'll do it again. We'll
But that's the
reiterate
important
that,
side
and
of the
then
box, right?
Yes.
And yeah, that's what I teach my students. You can't have a solution that comes outside of that box. That's where you
yeah, I love this. Okay, so I'm really gonna let you guys go now.
All right, thanks. All right,
Because we're
till
at
next month.
5:36. But this was so fun. I always have a great time talking to the both
It
of you. I
was.
love the energy. I always walk away just feeling so enlightened and so empowered. So super cool. Thank you so much, Rachel and Chris. And of course, tune in next Wednesday. Oh, not next Wednesday. Next month, the second Wednesday of the month. All right. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.